And welcome to the Ruby Tuesday. My name is Ruben, and this is my review for Netflix's original series VWars. A doctor is pitted against his best friend when an ancient disease turns people into vampires, from the comics by Jonathan Maberry and Alan Robinson. I've not read any of the comics. I didn't even know VWars was a comic book, even though I read lots of graphic novels and comics, so surprised I'd never even heard of this one. And this, I have to say, is nothing new. This vampire series hasn't done anything interesting, in my opinion. Anyway, let's get into the review. So there's 10 episodes. They're each about 35 minutes to about 50 minutes long, depending on the episode. And I felt like this series, when you watch it, you're trudging through mud. So if you've seen other vampire series that are 18, then they kind of go for the gore, and this one does that as well. There's a lots of gore in this one. That doesn't mean that the series is any good. The gore and special effects is good, I guess, and the acting is okay. But where this series is really let down is with the scripting and the dialogue for the characters. I was halfway through this series, I think it was episode 5, and I realized I still didn't care what was happening to these characters. So you have two best friends. At the beginning of the first 15 minutes of episode 1, I thought, wow, this is going to be something different, something interesting, because the establishing shot was in the snow. It was really dark and gritty. It was filmed well. It reminded me of 30 Days of Night. And then later on in that episode, there was some really interesting camera shots where you see best friend, and the camera's over them, and just the way they portrayed them, giving you an idea that this show is going to be about them. One person that contracts this disease, and they're treating vampirism, I guess. Well, it's not vampirism, it's a disease, and only later do people start calling it vampirism, or just being a vampire. And so that, I guess, is okay. There's no sparkling Twilight vampires, but it's more like a monster. If you've seen the Supernatural series and vampires in that, it's more akin to that than anything else that we see. There's no garlic. Garlic doesn't affect them. Cyanide doesn't really affect them. All the kind of the tropes of the early vampire films, that is not the law here. Here it is disease, and you need to treat the disease. And so we have the protagonist, Dr. Luther, who's portrayed a vampire before he was in the Vampire Diaries. So that was interesting that he is now not a vampire, but he's fighting against his best friend who's turned into a vampire. And the story arc is what you guess it will be. Once again, the government want to stop the outbreak of this vampirism, as well as they want to control it. And so you have the government doing the bad things that they always seem to do. It's the kind of trope that the storyline always seems to go on, and there's some people within the government that are good, and there's some that are bad. The issue I have with this series is that you really need to care about your protagonist if you're going to go along this journey with them. And so halfway through, as I said, in season 5, can you imagine there's 5 seasons? In episode 5, I was thinking to myself, wow, I still don't care about these characters. They've gone through so much already. And he has a son that you should care about, which I don't. And you have these friendships that are really strained, and these best friends. I care more about the best friends relationship than anybody else. And there are characters and there are actors in this series that have been established in the TV world and their acting abilities for ages. We've seen them in many other series, and they're good. So it's not the actors' fault. I feel like it's between the direction and the dialogue within this series. It was really hard to get on. It's fairly slow. Even though there are action sequences, the dialogue feels like it's being pushed. It feels like when you're watching it that the actors don't really want to be there. There is no emotional content for you to get to grips with really liking these characters. I do think it picks up in the latter episodes, and you will maybe start feeling engrossed in this series, but you really kind of have to push through those first few episodes to get to grips with what this series is trying to do. I like the fact that it's not the original kind of tropes of vampirism, that it is a disease, and they're working through that, and I feel like they've picked bits of other series and put that into here. I'm hoping that if it gets a second season, that the transfer from comic story to series will be good, because the actors in this are good, and I can't fault them with the direction and the dialogue. The dialogue just feels awkward, it feels weird, it feels forced. There's nothing wrong with the filming. I think the filming looks okay. It looks okay as a series. The score is okay. There's nothing terrible with it. It just didn't grip me. And with the caliber of series that Netflix is putting out at the moment, especially in their series, you have to wonder what are they going to do to step it up to keep people watching. Because if people don't watch, then we won't get any more, and this series will be another one of those doomed to be cancelled. And obviously, the actor who played 8 seasons of Vampire Diaries is here, and he wants to do, he wants to do a good job. And you always feel sad for actors who, give their all or come to a project and then it's cancelled within one season, because sometimes you get seasons where you get series like this where it gets a fan base and then it gets cancelled. I do wonder if anybody should get it entangled in this series at all, or maybe hold back, because at the moment I would say I would be surprised if it gets another season. I wasn't enthralled. I'm not looking for a second season. I hope if it does get a second season that the dialogue is much sharper and the way the actors are directed is different. Just felt blurred to me. There's nothing new. There's nothing fresh. I would say this is like a middle down the path. It didn't do anything interesting for me. Even the monster change. So they have these teeth that you see from the vampires, and then they grow into like a deformity. I didn't think that looked great. I don't know how else they would have done it. I like the fact that that's like the one thing they're kind of trying that's slightly different from the norm, which is great. But it needed to be, they needed to stick to a path of where they wanted to go with it. Like either be 30 Days of Night or be, choose one path. I wasn't sure which path they were trying to go. It didn't feel like it knew what it wanted to be. Maybe it's because it had to establish this big world. I don't know. Like I said, the actors in it are good. It looks okay. It's just the dialogue and the directing of these stories that felt just really hard to get through, like walking through mud. I'm going to give it a C. Let me know what you thought about this series in the comments below. But most of all, until next time, remember, live long and Tuesday.